Roll with it.
Action.
Yo, yo.
Yo, yo, yo.
Back at it again. Back at it again. How are you, sir?
That's it. That's it. We about to bless the people with another episode.
That's it, yo. Tristan and Marcus talk wealth, yo. That's it, man. So we do. That's what we do. And as always, man, we're just coming at you from a place of love. You know what I mean? And we just pray that, you know what I mean, this really just meet you right where you're at as you guys continue to go out there and kind of just create and build wealth and generational wealth for you and your family, literally. And as always, do your research, man. This is our little disclaimer moment, right? So just do your research, do your own due diligence, because we're coming at you with, our professional, you know, advice, our professional lessons, our professional, expertise. And it still requires you to be and do your own research. Because at the end of the day, as much as we have a vested interest in having, or just seeing you succeed, no one should have a greater vested interest in your success than yourself.
True indeed.
Right? So, of course, do your own research and then kind of go from there. So, yo, Tristan, man, what are we talking about today, yo?
Well, now we got that disclaimer out the way. We of course, same thing. We always talk about creating wealth, creating generational wealth. So we already touched on the foundation, right? With the life insurance, setting up the next generation, making sure that they, get a bag when you pass, not if you pass, when you pass, right? And then we talked about building up from there, owning a piece of land, right? God ain't making no more land. Get you some real estate. Don't wait to buy real estate. Buy real estate and wait, right? We touched on that. Next, we talked about getting into the stock market, how saving your money under the mattress, your money goes down in value over time because of inflation. Put that money in the market. Use that dollar cost averaging to invest regularly, consistently over time. Use the power of compound interest and watch your money grow and grow and grow, especially over long, long periods of time, right? And we also talked about making sure that you set it up so that the beneficiaries of your investment accounts are your children, so they get the inheritance of all these stocks you invested 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago, right? So now that we got those out the way, we want to talk about another way that wealth is created, and that's business creation and ownership.
So good, yo. And again, last week we spoke about, buying stocks. And as I find, you may not have the intellectual property, so to speak, to, kind of start your own business and kind of build a business, but you have the opportunity to invest in other profitable, successful businesses, right? And then, I think it's just a great segue to continue this conversation on business and business ownership, right? And how valuable and almost foundational, fundamental it is as another tool to create that generational wealth, right? Because no one could take something funny. No one can really take something away from you if it's yours, you know what I mean? Unless you actually give it up. It's yours, you know what I mean? The shirt off your back, no one could really kind of take it off you unless you kind of give it to them. But we're not going to talk about, being mugged or anything. But, when you have that sense of ownership, it's yours. Right? So, I don't know, Tristan, I guess, where do you want to kind of take us from there, when it comes to, I guess, business ownership? And I guess, I don't know, maybe speak to, like, in our research with respect to, the four areas that are kind of important to kind of build generational wealth. Why is business ownership such a, I guess, pivotal pillar in these four steps, I'd say, or four areas to look at?
Man, that's a powerful question, and I feel like there's so many different ways that you can kind of take it from there. But I feel like if we're talking about wealth creation, I feel like business ownership must be brought up, because I feel like that's the primary vehicle through which wealth is created.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at like anybody that's rich, like they own a business. Like, I don't want to say rich, but anyone that's super rich or super wealthy, like, yeah, they own a business. And I feel like this is a topic that traditionally, especially coming from our community, that we're not really taught or we don't really learn at a young age. when I feel like in a lot of different cultures or communities, this is more kind of standard practice,
Mm.
you know, and as a result, like those communities are able to thrive and economically and, you know, just have more control and more power because they have that ownership or that boss mentality, not just in business, but kind of throughout their own life, you know?
For sure. And even as you say that, like, people could kind of quickly point to, the Rockefellers of the world. You know what I mean? The Irvings of the world. You know what I mean? Like Irving Tissue is kind of like, I'm not gonna mass that generational wealth. You know what I mean? And they didn't quote unquote start there. They had to build something up. And as you're speaking about kind of having that business ownership, I guess mindset and how that may not be maybe prevalent in our maybe culture, and it may be prevalent in other cultures. Also see it as a vehicle or something that you can actually just pass down, regardless of the size of the business, but it gives the next generation, your kids, really the opportunity to get ahead, as opposed to always starting from scratch all over again. You know what I mean?
Mm. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, for sure. Because even if you look at, well, like you said, you don't have to look at the Waltons, like the people who inherited Walmart or anything like that, but you do kind of have to look at it because we can learn from observation,
Mm-hmm.
right? Not everything you have to learn firsthand. You could look around in the world and see what's happening, and like these people are free financially because of the work that their ancestor put in by
Mm-hmm.
creating this corporation, this self-sustaining entity that runs and thrives without them actively participating, that now their children, whether they now want to step into the business and learn business and run it, or whether they want to pursue art or pursue whatever they're actually passionate about, they have that option
Mm-hmm.
because that wealth machine, that business was created and they inherited that ownership.
It's true.
So I think
100%.
so I think like, man, I think it comes back to having that mentality though. And I feel like it's very difficult because our whole lives, if you didn't grow up like I said, if you didn't grow up like this, then I feel like your whole life you're conditioned, like literally
Mm.
conditioned to pursue a path that's not conducive to entrepreneurship or starting your own business, you know? So to fight against that and to deprogram and unlearn and to relearn, and it's not easy, you know? So I feel like this is going to be something very interesting we're going to touch on, man. But yeah, I'm looking forward to delving more into this.
Sure, we're gonna dive into this even deeper, and only because there's like here for me right here and right now. I mean, for any of you who are entrepreneurs or even considering, business ownership, especially after this conversation, um, I'd say one book that's worthy of maybe listening, checking out is, and there's many great books out there, right? But there's one that just really just popped into my head in this quick conversation is the E Myth by Michael E. Gerber, right? So I'd say if anything, check that out as you continue to, you know, at the end of this session, really. So yeah, man. So thank you for kind of touching on that, Tristan. And I don't know, even like for myself, like I didn't really see business ownership as like I guess a vital thing to like later on when I started to think a bit more about generational wealth. How could I like pass something down to like my family and my kids? You know what I mean? At first, I always thought it was just like quote unquote just make money. I'll just give them a whole bunch of money, right? And it's like, sure, that's cool, great. But one thing that I learned about kind of building a business is one, that sense of like ownership, right? So outside of the whole, just feeling prideful, but it's the sense of ownership saying like that's mine. No one could take it from me. And the fact that this business could literally create passive wealth, that is something that they're gonna like walk into, right? And again, just that ownership that they cannot take that away from me. So I know we were in a conversation the other day talking about true ownership versus like false ownership,
Mm.
right? So I don't know if you want to quickly touch on that, because there could be a huge misconception, especially what's perceived in the world as like, this guy's got all this wealth because they own this, when in fact they may not actually own it, right? Because I remember at one point too, I don't know if we spoke about this already, but just like reading contracts, right? So I don't know. I'd say just quickly touch on, I'd say like true ownership, what all that is about, and then what could be perceived as maybe false ownership.
Yeah, well, like I feel like just with now, I feel like this is becoming a more common theme just in pop culture as a general. Like the I guess the importance of ownership and having business like acumen, and just like it's becoming more, I don't know, more talked about, you know, whether that's
Mm-hmm.
people in the music industry speaking out and speaking up, or whether that's
Mm-hmm.
people in comedy speaking up. But I want to first and foremost talk about like my personal experience first and like firsthand, you know.
Yep,
I
absolutely, for
guess this
sure.
sense of the fake ownership, and I see like some people are still kind of caught up in it, and it's like, man, it's bad because, well, I guess the first time I started to get like introduced to a lot of self-development material, or this idea of starting your own business,
Mm.
would be through multi-level marketing, you know. And it's like they're like, oh, you know, come and join our company and you're going to be an independent business operator and
Mm-hmm.
IBO. I was like, ooh, I'm gonna have my own business. You're like, yeah, you're gonna have your own business, you're gonna be self-employed. I was like, okay. But it's like, once you sign up and you're in the company and now you're learning and you're looking at the pay structure and you're looking at how much money you're generating for the company versus what you're getting paid, you're like, wait a minute, this don't make sense, this ain't right. And then you're realizing, wait a minute, I don't own a business.
Mm.
This, like, I'm working for them. These guys own the company.
Mm.
Like, they're the ones in control, they have the power, they own it. They give us this fake title of independent business operator, but in reality, we don't have no power, no control, no say. And that's when I was like first exposed to this idea of like this fake business ownership, you know?
It's so
But
powerful you say that, because again, we have similar backgrounds. Like that's another area where we cross paths again, right? In this, multi-level marketing world. And, kudos for you for kind of, catching on to that a bit earlier than, I may have. And which that's a lesson itself, you know what I mean? Because, for those of you who are listening, while you're on the journey, you know what I mean? Like the journey of life really is just amazing. You know what I mean? So instead of, I'd say, don't focus so much on someone else's lane, but stay in your lane and know that, you're on your course. But we give that a conversation another day. But even myself, right, in my independent business ownership practice, it's kind of like, again, of that nature of like multi-level marketing, thinking that, I own this when in fact, they're out there dictating, how much I get paid, when and at any point in time, I'm like, this is what we're going to change. It's like, well, what do you mean going to change this all of a sudden? Right? So there's like, yes, maybe like a sense of ownership, but like not true ownership. And then even in my practice, when it comes to like my book of business, it's kind of like, I don't even own my book of business, you know what I mean? Where I was. So it's like, is it really mine then? So it's like a false ownership, because it's like, if I decide to change, brokerages or whatever, or kind of go on my own, do my clients come with me? And it's like, well, no, they kind of stay here. So it's like, so it ain't mine then.
right.
Right? But go ahead, man. Go ahead.
Nah, I didn't want to interrupt you because I think that's very powerful what you're saying, because man, it's like, ah, if we don't take the time to read the fine print, and if a
Mm.
lot of times we read the fine print and we still don't really understand the fine print, but oh, okay, that sounds good. Let me go ahead and get started. But it's
Sure,
like,
man.
it's crazy because like I touched a little bit on like, you know, like the celebrities, like Kanye West was famously speaking out about how these recording contracts are, and he was just saying that it's like akin to modern day slavery, because as the artist, you're creating all this material, all of this music, all of this content or whatever, but in reality, it's like the label's the ones owning that.
Mm.
And it's like Dave Chappelle famously just recently spoke out, and he's talking about the Chappelle show and how he doesn't own it, and how now it's being streamed, and he was very upset about this. And anyways, he makes like a joke, but not really a joke, because he's just telling the truth. And he's like, they put in the contract, like, we will own your name of the show and its likeness in perpetuity in the universe. So he's reading this and he's like, I don't know what that means. So he's like, I hire a guy to tell me what it means, but I'm so naive that I don't realize that the guy I'm hiring is working for the company that's put me in the contract. So they're all in cahoots. They're all telling me it's a good deal. Meanwhile, the show blows up, does multi billions in sales, breaks all kinds of records, and I ain't seeing no bread off of that. They're streaming it now. I'm not getting paid off of that, but I created it. I created the skit. So it's like, just brings up the importance of ownership, you know? Like, it's very important, man. It's very important. And I
There's a
feel
few other
like,
things. Go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
and I feel like even if, like, I know we're talking about entrepreneurship today, and I feel like obviously not everyone could be an entrepreneur. You know, it's not easy. It's not glamorous. It takes a certain type of person to do it, especially to do it and succeed. Like, it's definitely not easy, and it's a lot of risk, and there's a lot of downside as well, right? That people may not hear about. But I think the important thing that everyone that takes the time to tune into these shows or watch our episodes is not that I have to be a boss, not I have to be in stock, not I have to own land, not I have to have life insurance, but you need to own something. You need to own something. You need to own assets. Okay, so you can have your job, but take a percentage of what they're paying you and invest back into yourself. Whether you're taking that money and you're putting it into your life insurance premium every month, whether you're putting it into the stock market, whether you're saving up, buying your own house, the roof you live in, the roof over your head where you live in, whether that's, saving up to start your side business or your website or your side hustle. It's like, you got to have ownership. You got to own something in addition to, even if you have a job, you got to own something, because that's in essence how all wealth is created. If you don't have the ownership, you don't own no assets, there's no wealth,
You got a mic?
I have a mic.
You probably just drop it and just like walk off right now, because that what you just said there was just fire. It was gold. Like, nothing to say on top of that. But I really love what you said. And I'll touch on something that popped in my head, but it's just having that sense of ownership. It doesn't matter what it is. Because I know we spoke about 4 areas, and we're going to dive into the 4th a bit more now, although we already dove into it. But it's like, I know for some of those, and myself included at times, you know what I mean? When I hear about, you need to have A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So like, oh my goodness. For many, it can be overwhelming. It's like, how in the world am I going to start all of that? You know what I mean? So for you to kind of break it down and just say like, yo, get something and own it. You know what I mean? From A to F, pick a letter. And then once you kind of maybe have that down pack, so to speak, you can then slowly start to build upon other areas. But don't go throughout, life, so to speak, without creating and having ownership on something. Because as he's mentioned, ownership is what you could actually pass down. Insurance, real estate, business, stocks. Build something of some ownership so you can actually pass it down. 100%. So I just wanted to underline that in case anyone missed it.
And something
So good.
I want to bring forward as well is, since you touched on ownership, is like, it's now become like easier than ever to have some sorts of ownership. And what I mean in this sense is like, the internet has made it easier for people to create different kinds of assets that they can own and distribute and eventually monetize, right? So whether that's starting your own podcast, whether that's putting out your own music, whether that's putting out videos on the internet, whether that's creating your own website, whether that's creating a social media page, like, there's more than one way to skin a cat. And with today's internet, there's a lot of opportunities where you can monetize content or, information that you can now share and distribute. And, so it's easier than ever. And I feel like, go into things having that boss mentality, like, because it's going to benefit you. So if you're an artist, don't go trying to get a record deal think about how can you start a label.
Mm,
You know, if you're selling real estate, don't think how can I get my real estate license, how can I sell real estate. Think how can I have a real estate company. You know,
mm.
think big, think ownership, because just having that mindset alone will really open up a lot more doors than kind of just thinking about what we've been conditioned to think about, you know?
So true. Like we're literally our own limitation. You know what I mean? Like our goals are as big or as small as we want to make them. You know what I mean?
Right.
So if you start thinking about that type of level of, ownership, 100%. Like I was in a conversation with my managing partner. We're talking about Deloitte at one point. You know what I mean? And it's kind of like, it really just blew my mind because just to hear kind of where he was thinking really expanded my mind to another dimension. Because we're talking about if I kind of know what they do. I'm like, not really. I just know they're like an accounting firm, right? And then it's like, well, yes, they are, and they're almost like a hub for, like they have their own lawyers, their own um, consulting, so like almost like a consulting firm. Where in the beginning, right, what I heard is that people that come to them for accounting, and it's like if whoever's coming to them needs other services, they would at least then like say, here, go to this law firm practice, or go to they start not delegating, outsourcing, so to speak. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? To the point where they got big enough to buy that company.
Mm.
And it's like, well, just go to this law practice, which, we own them now. You know what I mean? And then for me, that was just like an expansion where it's kind of like, oh my goodness, like how something as, big and or small could be like, I guess what I'm getting at is how limited, one's mind thinking could be until you're in these types of conversations where at that point it's limitless, right? So you really are your own limitation when it comes to what's truly capable and available.
True indeed, yo. I believe that 100%. I believe that 100%. So now getting back into this entrepreneurship, I feel like first and foremost, what is a business? You know, we talked about what it isn't a little bit, like how
Mm.
sometimes we get tricked, like with these multi-level marketing companies or like these other companies that try to give their employees or empower the people that work for them by giving them that title of a business owner. But in reality, like what do you think?
It's a good question, you know what I mean? And it's like, um, I see first when I just think like top of mind, business is, I guess a something in which I can create the kind of, create income or create a livelihood, kind of generate income. You know what I mean? And if we're gonna kind of look at definitions here, right? It's, person's regular occupation, profession, or trade, or the practice of making one's living by engaging in commerce, right? So it's, I guess an avenue or something that you can literally create to generate income. You know what I mean? Back in the days, it was agriculture. That was the form of business, right? Whether it be exchange of, cattle and crops, right? That was the business. To the point where now it's, many other things. My daughter loves to sew, right? And now it's like, Daddy, I got a couple of orders for, bonnets to make, right? So let me go sell that, right? Business opportunity. So once there's, I guess, an exchange of services for like a product or a good or money, that is when I would denote it and deem it as, all right, yeah, you got a business.
Mm, interesting. Because as you were saying that, I was thinking, and like I touched on this a little bit at the last episode, but once again, I was just trying to think of like the opposite. So I was like
Mm,
listening to what Marcus is saying. I was like, is this true? Let me see what's the opposite. And I was like, okay, yeah, that's true. But then I thought about like, I think that's starting to change now with
mm,
technology because when you look at like Facebook, I guess maybe like the first decade, they didn't monetize it, you know, they just created a website and they focused on like increasing the users, increasing the traffic, increasing the information they can gather. Or even if you look at like a Google, it's like they just started to let's try to make searching on the internet easier. But it's
mm.
like over time they realize, well, we're getting this information, like, oh, we're getting all this, okay, this has some value. Oh, like, so I feel like with the internet now, it's not really just about generating an income, because I feel like once you create the value initially,
Mm.
then you can create the income maybe in the future. Or there's like, I heard Netflix don't make even any money. I heard Netflix be making all their money from raising stock and selling, and so it's like they be spending more money than they're making.
Yep.
So I'm like, like maybe that's not the case. And I think maybe because we've been so conditioned to think that we gotta like work for money, that we're
Mm.
thinking, okay, like once you start something that's making money, that's a business. But I feel like once you already have an idea and you start to maybe put those ideas together and start to create some value, or even some, from there, I think you can have a business.
Almost like creating like a product or service, excluding the exchange for money. So even going back to the whole, and here we're in a conversation. We're in the dance right here, right? We're in a conversation, right? So even thinking about, as you mentioned before, with whether it be entertainment, you know what I mean. You brought up Chappelle, or let's take an artist for example, right? If they're doing stand up, right, you could deem that as a business, although they're not getting paid. Would that be correct? Or someone could be making music without the exchange for goods. Like, yeah, I'll go perform at your show for free,
Right.
right? Because that's what they do. Like, that's their service. That would be considered or deemed as a business. Yes, because what I don't want construed is, well, then maybe the question: would a hobby be a business?
No, I don't think so. But wait, actually, yes, a hobby could be turned into a business.
Okay,
Yes, 100%.
so
And
when does it start turning into a business?
so that's another thing. It's like, because when I was thinking about it, I was thinking, okay, like soccer can start as a hobby, but if you make the I guess the mindset shift to make it your career before it's a career, it can become a career. So I was thinking of it like this, like, okay, when you're an athlete and you're trying to become a professional, you're
Mm-hmm.
already being a professional before you get that professional contract. You're
Okay,
already working like a professional in order to get paid eventually.
got it. Okay,
You're not treating it like a hobby. You're not just playing casually. You're working day in, day out to improve, to get better, to take care of your nutrition, to sleep, to develop, improve your performance, right? In the same way a professional would, even before you're getting paid. So it's like, in that sense as well, it's like if you have a hobby, but you're taking it professionally, you're treating it professionally, that hobby can turn into a career or something that eventually maybe you build up a skill set to now where people will want to pay you.
got it. Okay, so then maybe for the listeners, how would you then summarize a business?
Hmm. That brings back to us our first question, bro.
Because this was deep. I guess what I got from that, in truth, right? Not to cut you off or interrupt your thought processes. Um, I almost got like business is a mindset, right? That's kind of what I heard, right? Like, yes, there is an exchange of a product or a service, whether it be entertainment, whether it's caring for someone, like whatever that product and or service is,
Yeah.
and or prior to it, quote unquote, being monetized, right? It's already a business in one's mindset first, because someone could take a hobby, which could stay as a hobby, but the minute it turns into a quote unquote business is when you say it is in your mind. And that's when you start thinking like a business.
Mm-hmm.
And the purpose of a business, in my opinion, one purpose of a business, not the only purpose, because the purpose of a business is to, solve a problem
Right.
that's out there,
Right.
right? If there's a, sadness, I'm going to create laughter. You know what I mean? Like if there's, I'm going to create, you know what I mean? Like it's to solve a problem that's out there, right? But once there is an exchange of, I guess, say, money for your services or products, that's when I also see the second side of a business is to also generate some form of income, right? To continue to um, solve this problem even more, right? So you brought up Netflix, right? Where they still, they're publicly traded. So they're bringing in all this capital, right? Although they may not show a profit, they're bringing all this capital through investors so that they can continue to solve that problem in the world, right,
Mm,
of entertainment.
right.
That's just kind of what I saw and hearing from what we just kind of talked about, that what we're in
Yeah,
a dance with.
yeah. And I think that comes back to like having boss thoughts, you know? Like having that mindset or that mentality. I think we touched on it at the beginning of the episode, and it's fitting that like after I propose the question, like what is a business? That after we break it down and dissect it and dispel, it's like we realize fundamentally it does come back down to the mindset.
Mm, absolutely, yeah,
Right.
100%. And even mindset, like it's even when you're out to create, your business, like that intellectual property, you want that protected. Like that's your IP, you know what I mean? So you talk about Chappelle and his ideas, and at one point you talk about, I guess, his jokes, right? I don't even get deep into it, but like you want to protect your intellectual property, right? As you're building your business, right? Or creating that sense of ownership, right? Because that's yours. You know what I mean? Your ideas, your thought process. Because once you kind of, again, it's crazy because it's unique to you. Like you see a problem out there, and it's so unique that's like, you know what, I could solve that problem, right? And no one else can solve the problem better than you can, right? So you just want to make sure that's properly protected, right? And no one else kind of runs off with it and maybe just, I don't know, doesn't do the good service that you probably would, right? So um, I don't know. I just want to touch on like protecting your intellectual property as you're building your business.
Yeah, I think that's important because just to break it down simpler for the people that may not know, intellectual property is can be something like a logo. This can be, that you would trademark. It could be your brand name that you would get a trademark for, so no one else can operate as a business under the same name that you have. It can also be copyright. So if you write a particular phrase or a book of work or something like that, that no one can, plagiarize your words or take your ideas and try to sell them off as their own. So I think these things are very important. And you know that, like we said at the beginning of the episode, it comes down to consulting the right people. And as
Mm,
Marcus mentioned, you got to consult with your lawyer, you got to consult with your accountant about these different investments and these different things that we bring up so that you can do your own due diligence and look more into these things. But, just realize that recognizing your own value or recognizing the value of your own ideas, because it's like, just because you sit down and you draw a logo, like that's value. That's
mm,
intellectual property. Your business may not have started yet. Your business may not be operating. You may not even have your service or your brand or your product yet. But if you created a name or you created a logo, like that has some worth to it. Now it's up to you now to do the work behind it to build that up. But
mm.
there's some value just in the creativity of making something, right? So I think that's important, man. That you brought up, like, getting your intellectual property and getting your owning your IP and doing the necessary legal things once you're going into business and going think about things the right way. Because just speaking from experience, like not having any experience and then trying to start a business, it's like you end up doing a lot of things the wrong way and you have to learn from doing things the wrong way.
Mm.
So I feel like, making sure that your books are in place about managing your finances, what you're spending, what's coming in, doing the due diligence about trademarking your name and setting up your website and searching to make sure no one else has that same business name. Like these things are important. So thank you for bringing that up, yo, because it's making me also reflect and be like, you know, let me go and get all my IP set up properly and do the legal work behind some of these ideas I have in my brain before I
Mm.
put them out.
No, it's key. And I was in a session the other day talking about just protecting your digital assets, and be it for it's a conversation for like a later point in time. But like it's crazy how in the era we're in now, digital assets is so important. You know what I mean? Digital meaning your website, domain names, like all these things are vital that need to be protected. You know what I mean? So that's again a future conversation for another time, but it kind of ties into protecting that intellectual property that may be digital now. And another thing that you touched on that I think is so important is, and it really just brings me back to when you're talking about, contracts and, Chappelle and, how he just didn't know and he hired a lawyer, and we're telling people do the due diligence. It may look like getting a second and third opinion
Mm-hmm. Word
because
up. Don't be afraid too. And a lot of these people will give you a free consultation too. So take advantage of those.
that's it. Because I think when we're talking, offline, you're saying like, you just didn't know that this guy was already on the inside. He was already working with so and so. So it's like, one can be naive, get one opinion, when in fact, who he's getting an opinion from is in cahoots with the other person. So then, you know what I mean? You're in a losing situation from the beginning.
Right.
So, getting a second or third opinion, don't be afraid to be like, yo, let me sit on that. Let me think about that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Take the
Don't be afraid to
contract
say
home,
that.
read it through.
That's it. That's it. Because this is your life, man. Your life, your intellectual property. This is your business. This is what you're out to create an ownership of. Doesn't matter what it is. Business, insurance, real estate. Like, take the time to get that second or third opinion. Because this is, again, your hard-earned money that you're building for your family. And there's nothing worse than going into a deal knowing that, crap, I probably should have took that extra step, or probably should have asked that one additional question. You know what I mean? So I think I just wanted to touch on that because I thought it was just so gold, and I don't want to step over that. So anyone listening, by all means, man, take that extra second, take that extra question, 100%.
Word.
Yeah, man.
Because just from experience, like when we first bought like this house that we're in now, like where I'm recording from, like we didn't have windows, right? We bought a brand new house, so we would call the people, and the first people that came were like, "Okay, that seems like a decent price." Got it done. Next thing we know, we're realizing my friend lives across the street. He's like, "Yo, I got it done for X amount." I was like, "What?" That's like half the amount we got to pay for it. So that now when it was time to paint, like we got in 4 or 5 different people, and if we didn't do that, we would have thought it was be reasonable to pay a couple thousand, but we found one guy who knew what he was doing. We got it for the low, like less than half what all the other quotes were. But it's like you got to be afraid to not have multiple offers and get multiple people and get multiple quotes. And I think that's a valuable gem you drop, because man, if you had told me that 2 years ago, I could have saved some bread on these blinds, man.
That's it, man, and that's it. Yeah, so don't be afraid, man. Like, who cares? You know what I mean? And hey, there's great salesmen out there. You know what I mean? And they'll sell you on anything. But just tell them, like, yo, let me take that extra second. You know what I mean? And if they stand behind who they are and what they do,
They'll be cool.
And that's it. If they really stand behind the service and the service that they truly provide and offer, they know you'll come back to them, and they should not worry, right? And that's it.
Word up.
That's powerful, man.
Yeah, bro. Well, yeah.
All right.
Is there anything else you think we got to touch on?
Well, yeah. So when it comes to ownership, right? We already talked about, I guess, having ownership is important. We already talked about, the importance of, getting contracts and getting, secondary opinion. And we did touch on, false ownership versus, true ownership. And, I guess touch on, what a business is and what it isn't, and I guess why one would have ownership. And yeah, I'm not sure if there's anything else pressing, right? And again, I just see it as an opportunity really to, again, powerfully set your family up. You know what I mean? Like, literally, like if you can actually create something, and not just in the context of business, but if you're able to kind of create something, have that sense of ownership, that's something that you could actually pass down, to your kids. So the fact that we're talking about generational wealth, you can only pass down something that you have, right? So here you go, right? And if you don't have it, if you don't have ownership on it, then you really cannot pass that down. And I think that's just something that, is worthy of, considering, worthy of thinking about. You know what I mean? What do I have now that I could pass down? Yeah, you could probably pass down jewelry that you have. Cool, great. Like you could pass that down. And what else can you pass down that you could almost just set your family up so they don't have to work as hard? you know, as they continue to grow, right? How do you become the Rockefellers? How do you become the Irving? How do you become, you know, the Walton? How do you kind of create that type of legacy, right? And you may not see it in your lifetime, but to know that you could almost set up your family such that, you know, your kids, you know, 3, 4 generations down can benefit from, you know, what you did. That's, you know, that'll make the world of a difference. You know what I mean?
For
Thank you
real.
forever.
For real. Oh, I think we should end right there, man. Let that one sink in.
Alrighty.
Again, people, thank you guys for tuning in. Appreciate you guys giving us, you know, a moment of your time. Marcus, you want to say anything to the people before we get out of here?
No, I'm complete, man. So just saying, it's always a pleasure, really, to just be with each and every single one of you guys. You know what I mean? We're loving the comments, we're loving the feedback. You know what I mean? So again, just you know where to reach us at, right? Just continue to hit us up, man, and we'll talk about whatever. Again, you also want to hear about. You know what I mean? And we're here for you, really to just be a contribution, and you know support your growth in creating generational wealth, right? And whatever that looks like. So again, this is Tristan and Marcus talking wealth.
Peace.
Easy.